Dragonsong by McCaffrey, Chapter 1, Part 2. As she turned to walk back to the land side of the cavern, she saw that the other boats were discharging their passengers quickly and quietly. Her father's boat, the biggest of the half-circle fleet, had already tacked back into the harbor. Giannis's voice carried across the water above the identical sounds of creaking boats and muted voices. "Quickly now, men, we've got a good breeze rising and the fish will be biting after 3 days of storm." The oarsmen hurried past her to board their assigned fishing boats. It seemed unfair to Manali that Petterone, after a long life's dedication to half-circle hold, was dismissed so quickly from everyone's mind. And yet, life did go on. There were fish to be caught against winter's hungry mouths. Fair days, turning into the cold months of the turn, were not to be squandered. She quickened her pace. She'd far to go around the rim of Dock Cavern, and she was cold. Manali also wanted to get into the hold before her mother noticed that she didn't have the drum. Waste was not tolerated by Mavi any more than idleness by Giannis. While this was an occasion, it had been a sad one, and the women and children, and also the men too old to see fish, observed a decorous pace out of the cavern, making smaller groups as they headed toward their own holds in the southern arc of half-circles sheltering palisade. Manali saw Mavi organizing the children into work groups. With no Harper to lead them in the teaching songs and ballads, the children would be kept occupied in clearing the storm debris from the white-sanded beaches. There might be sun in the sky and the dragon rider still circling on his brown, but the wind was frigid, and Manali began to shiver violently. She wanted to feel the warmth of the fire on the great hold's kitchen hearth and a cup of hot claw inside her. She heard her sister Stella's voice carrying on the breeze. "She's got nothing to do now, Mavi. Why do I have to?" Manali ducked behind a group of adults, avoiding her mother's searching glance. Trust Stella to remember that Manali no longer had the excuse of nursing the ailing Harper. Ahead of her, one of the old aunts tripped, her querulous voice raised in a cry for help. Manali sprinted to her side, supporting her and receiving loud protestations of gratitude. "Only for Petterone would I have dragged these old bones out to the cold sea this morning. Bless the man, rest the man," the old woman went on, clinging with unexpected strength to Manali. "You're a good child, Manali, so you are. It is Manali, isn't it?" The old one peered up at her. "Now you just give me a hand up to old uncle, and I'll tell him the whole of it, since he hasn't the legs to leave his bed." So Sella had to supervise the children, and Manali got to the fire, at least long enough to stop shivering. Then old auntie would have it that the uncle would be grateful for some claw too. So when Mavi entered her kitchen, her eyes searching for her youngest daughter, she found Manali dutifully occupied in serving the oldster. "Very well then, Manali. While you're up there, see that you set the old man comfortably. Then you can start on the glows." Manali had her warming cup with the old uncle, and left him comfortable, mournfully exchanging tales of other burials with the aunt. Checking the glows had been her task since she had grown taller than Sella. It meant climbing up and down the different levels of the inner and outer layers of the huge sea hold. But Manali had established the quickest way to finish the job so she'd have some free time to herself before Mavi started looking for her. She had been accustomed to spending those earned minutes practicing with the Harper, so Manali was not surprised to find herself eventually outside Petterone's door. She was surprised, however, to hear voices in his room. She was about to charge in angrily through the half-open door and demand an accounting when she heard her mother's voice clearly. "The room won't need much fixing for the new Harper, so it won't." Manali stepped back into the shadow of the corridor. "The new Harper?" "What I want to know, Mavi, is who is to keep the children up in their learning until he comes." That voice was Surreal's, the wife of the first holder, therefore spokeswoman for the other hold women, to Mavi as the sea holder's lady. She did well enough for this morning. You have to give her that, Mavi. Giannis will send a message ship. Not today or tomorrow he won't. I don't fault the sea holder, Mavi, but it stands to reason that the boats must fish, and the sloop's crew can't be spared. That means 4 or 5 days before the messenger gets to Iggenhold. From Iggenhold, if a dragon rider obliges by carrying the message. But we all know what the old-timers at Iggenweir are like. So let's say Harper drums to the Master Harbour Hall at Fort is another 2-3 days. A man has to be selected by Master Harbour Robinson and sent over land and by ship, and with the thread falling at any time it pleases, no one travels fast or far in a day. It'll be spring before we see another Harper. Are the children to be left without teaching for months? Surreal had punctuated her comments with brushing sounds, and there were other clatters in the room, the swishing of bed rushes being gathered up. Now Manali could hear the murmurs of 2 other voices supporting Surreal's arguments. Pederin has taught her well. Harpering is a man's occupation. Fair enough, if Seaholder'll spare a man for it. Surreal's voice was almost belligerent because everyone knew the answer to that. Truth be told, I think the girl knew the sagas better than the old man this past turn. You know his mind was ranging back in time, Mavi. Giannis will do what is proper. The finality in Mavi's tone firmly ended that discussion. Manali heard footsteps crossing the old Harper's room. She ducked down the hall, around the nearest bend, and down to the kitchen level. It distressed Manali to think of anyone, even another Harper, in Pederin's room. Obviously it distressed others that there was no Harper. Usually such a problem didn't arise. Every hold could boast of 1 or 2 musically able men, and every hold took pride in encouraging these talents. Harpers liked to have other instrumentalists to share the chore of entertaining their holds during the long winter evenings. And it was also the better part of wisdom to have a substitute available for just such an emergency as Half Circle was experiencing. But fishing was hard on the hands. The heavy work, the cold water, salt and fish oils thickened joints and calloused fingers in all the wrong places. Fishermen were often away for many days on longer hauls, and after a turn or 2 at the net, traps, and sail line, young men lost their skills at playing anything but simple tunes. Harper teaching ballads required deft fingers and constant practice. By putting to sea to fish so quickly after the old Harper's burial, Giannis thought to have time enough to find an alternative solution. There was no doubt that the girls could sing well, play well, and she did not disgrace the hold or Harper that morning. It was going to take time to send for and receive a new Harper, and the youngsters must not lose all progress in the learning of basic teaching ballads. But Giannis had many strong reservations about putting such a heavy responsibility on the shoulders of a girl not 15 turns old. Not the least of these was Manali's distressing tendency toward tune-making. Well enough and amusing now and again in long winter evenings to hear her sing them, but old Pederin had been alive to keep her to rights. Giannis wasn't sure that he could trust her to not include her trivial little whistles in the lesson. How were the young to know that hers weren't proper songs for their learning? The trouble was, her melodies were the sort that stayed in the mind, so a man found himself humming or whistling them without meaning to. By the time the boats had profitably trawled the deep and tacked for home, Giannis had found no compromise. It was no consolation to know that he wouldn't have any arguments from the other holders. Had Manali sung poorly that morning, but she hadn't. As sea holder for Half Circle, he was obliged to bring up the young of the hold in the traditions of Pern, knowing their duty and how to do it. He counted himself very lucky to be beholden to Bend and Weir, to have Flare, Bronze, Nemeth's rider as Weir leader, and Lessa as Rameth's Weir woman. So Giannis felt deeply obliged to keep tradition at Half Circle, and the young would learn what they needed to know, even if a girl had the teaching. That evening, after the day's catch had been salted down, he instructed Mavi to bring her daughters to a small room off the great hall, where he conducted whole business, and where the records were stored. Mavi had put the harper's instruments on the mantel for safekeeping. Appropriately, Giannis handed Manali Petteran's guitar. She took the instrument in properly reverential manner, which reassured Giannis that she appreciated the responsibility. "Tomorrow, you'll be excused from your regular morning duties to take the youngsters for their teaching," he told her, "but I'll have no more of those finger-twiddlings of yours." "I sang my songs when Petteran was alive, and you never minded them." Giannis frowned at his tall daughter. "Petteran was alive. He is dead now, and you will obey me." Over her father's shoulders, Manali saw her mother's frowning face, saw her warning head shake, and held back a quick reply. "You bear in mind what I've said." And Giannis fingered the wide belt he wore. "No tuning." "Yes, Giannis." "Start tomorrow, then? Unless, of course, there's thread fall, and then everyone will bait long lines." Giannis dismissed the two women and began to compose a message to Master Harper to go when he could next spare the sloop's crew. They'd sail to Eggenhold about the time Half Circle had some news of the rest of Pern anyway, and he could ship some of the smoked fish. The journey needn't be a wasted trip. Once in the hallway, Mavi gripped her daughter's arm. "Don't disobey him, girl." "There's no harm in my tunes, Mother. You know what Petteran said. I'll remind you that the old man's dead, and that changes everything that went on during his life. Behave yourself while you stand in a man's place. No tuning. To bed now, and mind you turn the glow baskets. No sense in wasting light. No eye needs."